It's the 4th of May 1980 and Joseph Broz Tito has died.
Roosevelt, Stalin, Churchill, Chiang Kai-shek, de Gaulle, Tito, the great Allied leaders of World War II, all gone now. The last of them, President Tito of Yugoslavia, died today.
Under Tito, Yugoslavia was a stable and united nation with brotherhood and unity, but only a decade later, nationalism and violence would tear apart the state he fought so hard to preserve. During the 1980s, Yugoslavia struggled with economic stability, $21 billion worth of debt, and rising nationalism across its 6 republics. At this time, Yugoslavia was governed by 8 members of the League of Communists, including representatives from Bosnia, Croatia, Macedonia, Montenegro, Slovenia, Serbia, and the autonomous provinces of Kosovo and Vojvodina. In 1986, Milosevic was elected as Serbian representative and was determined to centralize power. In a move that was criticised by the other republics, he orchestrated the anti-bureaucratic revolution of 1989, which overthrew the leaders of Montenegro and the autonomous provinces, replacing them with his allies. This effectively created a voting bloc of 4 out of the total 8 members in the League of Communists. He then abolished Kosovo's autonomy, sparking protests from ethnic Albanians in Kosovo which were put down with force. By January 1990, Croatia, Slovenia and Macedonia opposed Serbian dominance and sought greater autonomy, which they made evident at the 14th Congress of Yugoslavia. During this Congress, Serbia vetoed any attempt by the other republics to decentralize power, and in response, the delegations of Croatia, Slovenia and Macedonia walked out in protest.
Da su se nažalost stekli uslovi da napustimo 14. Kongres Saveza komunista Jugoslavije.
Later, those same nations held their own independence referendums, which passed despite boycotts from the Serbian minorities. In August of 1990, ethnic Serbians in the Croatian city of Knin, a majority Serbian city, rebelled against the government. However, when the Croatian forces were heading to put down the protest, they were stopped by Yugoslav fighter jets. This turned the rebellion into an uprising assisted by the Yugoslav National Army, or JNA, whom also provided the rebels with weapons. The JNA also intervened in Slovenia, sparking the brief 10-day war.
ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
For a week now, ever since the Yugoslav republics of Slovenia and Croatia declared their independence from Yugoslavia, the administration has been saying they were wrong, that Yugoslavia's unity must be preserved. The State Department says unity should not be preserved by force. There is no evidence the Yugoslav army is listening, yet another ceasefire has collapsed.
At Vernica, about 12 miles west of the Slovenian capital of Ljubljana, a column of Yugoslav army tanks broke out of their base and advanced toward the capital, firing as they went. In the Croatian capital of Zagreb, where independence was also proclaimed last week, a crowd of civilians tried to block a Yugoslav army tank unit from going north to Slovenia. At least 3 people were killed when troops opened fire on the
shortest of the Yugoslav conflicts, as an agreement was signed after 10 days, where Yugoslavia would withdraw their forces and Slovenia would postpone their independence for 3 months. However, the JNA was ready to launch a full-scale invasion into Slovenia, but it was denied by the Serbian representatives, as Slovenia had a very little Serbian population, only making up 50,000 or 2.5% of the total population. But unlike Slovenia, Croatia had a large Serbian population that made up 12% of the total population, or 500,000 people. By 1991, the Yugoslav National Army sent a force over to Vukovar to assist the rebels and begin capturing many Croatian towns, including ones that weren't populated by Serbians whatsoever, committing atrocities along the way. The Croatian War of Independence was well underway.
The fragile peace in Yugoslavia is more fragile than ever. Truce talks between federal officials and the Republic of Slovenia broke down again today, and the president of Yugoslavia's largest republic is warning his people to be prepared for war.
The sniper in a church across the road. David was hit in the back.
David was shot on Friday afternoon while covering the horrific battle for Vukovar. as I tipped over when the bullet hit, I didn't know what it was. I thought it could have been a mortar or anything. I thought suddenly I'm not in touch with my legs. And I'm on the ground. And I was terrified that spine had been hit or something serious had happened. But then I started feeling my toes as they dragged me away. I realised my legs were coming with me, so I was very pleased.
And Lord Carrington, the EU peace negotiator, asked if Serbia would withdraw with the demand that Croatia was subject to the Agreement of Human Rights of Serbs, where Milosevic agreed. However, when it came for the document to be signed, the agreements were changed to allow all 6 republics of Yugoslavia to become independent, which Milosevic then refused as this would have dissolved Yugoslavia. But the other 5 republics signed the document, which then resulted in the Serbian pressuring of Montenegro to withdraw their signature. By January 1992, the Sarajevo Agreement was signed as a ceasefire document instead, which declared UN protected areas in Croatia and the withdrawal of all parties without solving the conflict. However, the worst of it was yet to come. A larger, more devastating war was about to erupt in Bosnia. On the 3rd of March 1992, Bosnia too declared independence from Yugoslavia, which did not go down well with Milosevic, considering Bosnia has a total of 1.3 million Serbs living there and making up 31% of the total population. The referendum that Bosnia held to justify the independence had a below 2/3 voter turnout, making it trivial at best. The very next day, a Serbian civilian was killed by a Bosnian, causing widespread protests, and in response, Serbia declared the Republic of Srpska inside Bosnia, and transferred Bosnian Serbs in the Yugoslav National Army to fight on their behalf. And so began the Bosnian War with the siege of Sarajevo.
Da dođu velike mase mirotvoraca, takozvanih, mirotvorci. I naša policija se obezbijedila da se to ne desi.
Onoliko koliko smo mi uspjeli vidjeti, veoma su ozbiljno povrijeđeni.
In April 1992, SFR Yugoslavia came to an end and was replaced by the Federal Republic with Milosevic as its leader. Over the course of the war in Bosnia, the UN was heavily involved with humanitarian support with the creation of safe zones protected by the UN for refugees to seek safety. It was this very thing that would bring NATO into the conflict against Serbia. Bosnian Serbs used heavy artillery on Sarajevo, killing many civilians inside of a UN safe area, which was met with a demand from NATO that they withdraw their heavy weapons from the hills of Sarajevo. The Serbians denied this, and in an effort to prove they weren't threatened by NATO, they kept attacking using heavy weaponry. In response, NATO performed an airstrike against a command post, which was then responded to again with the Serbians capturing a UN-protected town and taking 150 UN personnel hostage. This was the final straw for NATO as they then embarked on a full-scale bombing campaign against the Bosnian Serbs, forcing them to come to the negotiation table. The Peace Treaty of Dayton was signed in December of 1995 and established the Constitution of Bosnia and Herzegovina as well as the formation of the Republic of Srpska as an entity within the country. This would still not be the end of conflicts in Serbia. Over in Kosovo, the KLA, or Kosovo Liberation Army, had been formed in 1993 as a response to the discrimination of Albanians by the Milosevic government. The KLA received arms through weapon smuggling from Albania and had been involved in skirmishes with Serbian police since. However, on March 5th, 1998, an escalation by the Serbian police would see the eruption of war in Kosovo. Serbian police raided the leader of the KLA, Jashari's compound with the aim of killing him and his family.
Ljudi koji su bili naoružani, bili su spremni da poginu. U redovima policije bude još više žrtava. I iz tog razloga je bilo neophodno da se koristi jedan deo artiljerijskih sredstava.
The operation was successful, but in the process, 60 Albanians were killed, with the majority of them being civilians, including women and children. This event was condemned by the West, but condemnation would not stop more events like this from happening. By June 1998, NATO performed Operation Determined Falcon, which was a show of force by NATO over the Yugoslav borders intended to intimidate and stop Milosevic. At the same time, an American diplomat visited border areas affected by the fighting, taking photos with the KLA, confirming to the public that the US was in full support of Kosovo. However, Yugoslavia did not stop, capturing Orahovac and surrounding villages, including this one on September 26. At this location, another massacre of Albanians took place. Pressure for a ceasefire to be signed was mounting, and by the 15th of October, a short-lived ceasefire was enacted only to be broken by both parties before the end of the year. Further massacres and war would continue, leading to further condemnation, sanctions, and intervention from the West. The 15th of January saw a further 45 Kosovo Albanians killed, and this was the turning point for NATO, authorising airstrikes against Yugoslav targets not only in Kosovo but in the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia itself. This quickly resulted in the Rambouillet talks beginning on the 6th of February with the aim of discussing a definitive resolution to the conflict. The talks were held in France, however Milosevic remained in Belgrade, instead sending a delegation on his behalf. The most important items of the resolution included: the Yugoslav army and Serb security forces will withdraw completely from Kosovo. NATO would deploy a military force which will be authorised to use necessary measures to ensure compliance. NATO personnel shall have unimpeded access through the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, including airspace and territorial waters. The delegation refused the idea of NATO having passage inside of Yugoslavia, and in particular, the stationing of NATO troops in Kosovo instead of unarmed UN observers. By the 23rd of March, the only item Yugoslavia rejected was NATO troop presence, but NATO wasn't willing to budge, and so the negotiations failed. On Yugoslav national television, a state of emergency was declared, and on the 24th, NATO bombs began falling. The bombing campaign lasted from the 24th of March to the 11th of June, operating from bases in Italy and carriers located in the Adriatic. The only member of NATO that didn't involve itself was Greece. The brutal campaign not only bombed infrastructure and military targets, but entire cities such as Belgrade and Novi Sad. These bombings were not always accurate either, as an Albanian refugee convoy was bombed, mistaken for a Yugoslav military convoy, killing around 50 people. However, Milosevic was still defiant, and NATO began considering the use of ground forces, with the British Prime Minister Tony Blair ready to deploy 50,000 British soldiers. Russia was also convincing Milosevic to back down, and after realising that they wouldn't intervene, he accepted all the conditions of the treaty, and so on the 10th of June, 30,000 NATO peacekeepers entered Kosovo. The Yugoslav wars may have come to an end, but the troubles for Milosevic were far from over. Over the past decade, Milosevic's rule had been riddled with accusations of electoral fraud, political assassinations, media suppression, and genocide. In fact, becoming the first sitting head of state to be charged with war crimes. Yugoslavia, under his reign, had endured sanctions from the West, crippling its economy, a decade of war and months of bombing, and an election was coming up that wasn't looking too good for him. So on the 6th of July 2000, he changed the rules of the election. He introduced a 2-round voting system that allowed a maximum of 2 terms. However, it was speculated that these changes weren't in the interest of preserving democracy, but to keep himself from being sent to jail. In desperation for victory, he would kidnap and execute a former ally, now political opponent, Ivan Stambolic. His decomposed body was found 3 years later. Early elections were then called for on the 24th of September, with Milosevic claiming to win the first round, but after voter counts not adding up correctly, a recount was conducted, where his opponent of the New Democratic Party, Koštunica, won over 50% of the vote, enough for him to win in just 1 round. The democratic opposition called for the overthrow of Milosevic, which culminated in the 5th of October Revolution, also known as the Bulldozer Revolution. Not even the Yugoslav army commanders were willing to support him, and the very next day, Milosevic publicly accepted defeat.
It must concern you, though, that you are not trusted by the world community. People say that you are not believed.
Absolutely, absolutely, but just because of that, I'm saying, don't trust me. If you don't trust me. Please send people and check. Trust your own eyes, not to me.
It's the 1st of April 2001. Milosevic is hiding in his Belgrade home with gunfire raging outside. Just hours earlier, the police arrived with an arrest warrant for Milosevic, but as they did, his bodyguards forced them into a standoff. Milosevic, hiding in his villa, said that he would not be taken to prison alive. The following is the audio from the news coverage of the events that unfolded that day.
When the police tried to confront Milosevic in the wee hours of this morning, he told them flatly, I will not leave and go to prison alive. Milosevic making it clear that he and his bodyguards are prepared to fight it out with the Yugoslav authorities here, the Ministry of Interior Police. Mr. Milosevic still maintains a contingent of more than a dozen bodyguards, although the government has now officially stripped him of all but one bodyguard. Nonetheless, a loyal contingent remains with Mr. Milosevic in his villa in the suburbs of Belgrade as I speak.
The standoff lasted 36 hours, but after negotiations and agreements that he would not be extradited to The Hague at that time, he surrendered peacefully on April 1st, 2001. When Milosevic faced trial, he was being tried for genocide, complicity in genocide, murder, inhumane acts and forcible transfer, attacks on civilians, willfully causing great suffering and many other crimes. The ICTY indictment reads that Milosevic was responsible for the forced deportation of 800,000 ethnic Albanians from Kosovo and the murder of hundreds of Kosovo Albanians and hundreds of non-Serbs in Croatia and Bosnia. His trial began in The Hague on the 12th of February 2002, with Milosevic defending himself. However, before the trial could end, he would be found dead in his cell. The autopsy revealed that he had suffered a heart attack. He had known he was suffering from high blood pressure and heart problems, even requesting to seek specialized medical treatment at a cardiology clinic in Russia, which was denied by the tribunal shortly before his death. Today, Serbian public opinion about Milosevic remains controversial. His supporters view him as a defender of Serbian interests and a leader who stood up to Western intervention, whereas his critics view him as a war criminal who is responsible for the deaths of so many innocent lives. Serbia continues to face political instability today, where most recently, hundreds of thousands of protesters are protesting in Belgrade against government corruption. The issue of Kosovo is still prevalent to this day. Serbia doesn't recognize its independence, and only 105 out of 193 UN member states do. The effects of the Yugoslav wars and the collapse of the former Yugoslavia will be felt for decades to come. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe and like the video. I'd really appreciate it. A lot of effort goes into these ones, a lot more than my Hearts of Iron 4 videos. I am just one guy making these videos, so any help is appreciated, which means that I'm going to promote my Patreon. It's in the description, so make sure you go check out my Patreon. I have 3 tiers now, alright? I've got a gaming tier if you like my gaming Hearts of Iron 4 content, a tier for this channel if you like my history content. You can influence on what videos I'm going to make and get updates on future videos, and there will be a combined channel where you get my gaming and history content into one tier and you get updates for both. I'll see you guys in the next one in a bit. I don't know how long it's going to take the next one. I don't even know what the topic's going to be about. Maybe join my Patreon. You can vote on it.